Welcome back to another episode of Iron Sharpens Iron. We on Iron Sharpens Iron believe that who you surround yourself with matters, and at the heart of this belief is Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Welcome back to another week. Nathan, how's it going?
Good.
We don't have William on this week.
No, he got tied up in some other things, so our third leg of the stool, we'll try to balance it out without him. So
Yeah. Well, thankfully this week we have a lot to talk about with the month of June.
Yeah.
It's the month of the Sacred Heart.
Yeah, we should start off with that because that's the most important thing. And we were chatting before this. We have a guest in our next episode that we're going to record who will be coming on and talking specifically about the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the significance of that devotion. So
next week we will for sure get into the Sacred Heart, and it's definitely on our plate to do. We wanted to do it first, but with just the way this guest worked out, we're going to talk about transgenderism first. And
So let's start with the problem. Let's start with the damage.
Yes.
And then we'll get to the solution next
I'm sure
week.
Anyone who's on social media, they see the whole Pride Month agenda for every corporate company. Yeah. And then you get all the good memes about it too. But I mean, it's day one and I'm already sick of it.
Yeah, it's everywhere you go. And not only that, I mean, the lead up this particular year, it's come to a fever pitch already with some of the corporatism things, your Bud Lights and your Targets of the world that are, kind of reaping a financial whirlwind here with some of their advertising choices or product placement choices. And there's other ones. I've heard Kohl's is in the mix on this now, where they had some products out that were, and I don't even know the details of it because I'll be honest, I don't follow it that much because I have 5 kids at home and I can't follow social media feeds on what's the latest outrage. So
it's Target. I heard about Kohl's too. I didn't hear as much about Kohl's, mainly Target and Bud Light, because I guess those are I don't even ever go to Kohl's. Maybe it's just because I'm a single man who...
Maybe. See, as a married man, we do a lot to shopping at Kohl's.
No kids.
Those 30% off coupons, the wives love those.
Yep. So, I remember my mom would do some shopping at Kohl's, and I think occasionally she'd send me there to go get my dad some pants for Father's Day or something like that. And
I think men are generally confused by their marketing strategy anyway, because you need their card if you want to get their deals, and everything's really overpriced, but it's not because it's always like half off, 2 for $1, plus another 30% off, plus cash kickbacks if you come back, and all this stuff. And I think dads look at it and be like, no, what's the price?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, just give me a price. Let's go to a thrift store. Let's get you something used.
Exactly. Yep. It's all, Ron Swanson and buying everything at Food and Stuff, where he buys most of his food and some of his stuff.
Yeah. So. Exactly. So back to transgender. The whole shove it down everyone's throat. What is this doing to society? What is the issue that's...
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime when you have something so polarized as this, and you have on all the engines of culture and media and in politics and education and Hollywood, entertainment, the Dodgers kind of recently had their thing. I mean, they had sort of a sacrilegious thing recently, but they, a lot of these sports teams are showcasing, Pride Month and all of this stuff. So anytime you have these engines of culture ramming something down people's throats, like promoting and almost this aggressive activism against really the majority of the country and how they would see the world, and they just want to live peaceable lives. This is a non-issue practically in their life. You're going to get some tension, right? Because it's running up against with people and demanding that they consent to these claims when really they don't, and they just want to live their life. So I think it's always going to be volatile. It's always going to cause a certain tension to it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is like, even if it's people who might agree with it, it's just the fact that these people, they're shoving it down people's throat.
Yeah.
They're like, our company's doing this and you're going to accept it.
You're going to, exactly. It's this forced acquiescence to it. And the American spirit, insofar as it's still deeply embedded in us, doesn't like that so much. I mean, there's a country literally founded on the fact that, don't tread on me. I'm not paying the tax. We're going to fight against you in order to not pay the tax, kind of a thing. Going back to the Revolution and Boston Tea Party and not having representation in, the government, the British government and things like that, that actually represented their common good. I mean, the country is literally founded on revolution and rebellion in this way. So
Exactly.
Americans, I think, more than anybody else, still have, are a little ornery when it comes to being told what to do and not wanting to do it. You know, so.
Yeah, and they're really showing it with they're boycotting this time, which is
Bud Light. I read $15 billion is what they've lost in sales or market valuation. I'm not sure which metric it was, but I think it might have been market valuation, because $15 billion is a lot of money. So off their stock price, but their sales continue to just not do well, to the point where I've seen even they're giving Bud Light away just to try to get people to take it. So if you go in and buy a 15 pack. They'll get a voucher for $15, which is essentially the price you just paid for the Bud Light. So they're literally giving it away because people aren't buying it.
Which is saying something, I think, really big about what this issue is, just with the whole transgender issue in general. Because we've seen companies like promote other things that people don't agree with, and boycotts, I feel like, are never successful, really.
They don't sustain.
They don't sustain, and the company doesn't lose a ton of money, and it's just... It kind of happens and it blows over after, about a couple weeks.
Right. And
with this issue, it's like people look at it, and I was watching some stuff on like the Daily Wire and stuff, and they're talking about how it's become like this big joke now. Like if you're seen with the Bud Light now, it's like people see you and they're like, look at this guy's a girl over here, he's drinking, you changed genders or something like that. And so it's this joke, this running joke, and that's why people aren't buying it now. And it's just something that's really hard to recover. But this issue is like, It just took on this whole different...
You're really seeing it with, the Bud Lights and the Targets and things like that. That's at its most sort of terminal or superficial or end level, right? It's the end result of what's going on at a much, much deeper level. And I think that's really what we need to hit in on, is not the effects, the end effects of all of this, but like what is actually... at the root cause of this. Why is this such a big deal? And because it's huge. It's earth shattering. When we get into the sort of substance, the meat of the issue, it's something that's not like other issues. There's something altogether different here.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, back to what they did, is that their main person who was their sponsor that they picked, Dylan Mulvaney, I think his name was. And you watch this guy's TikToks or videos that he does, and it's just an insult to women everywhere. I mean, you watch it, and it's just, what is happening here? And, and this is the person they chose to have as their spokesperson. And I think that's what you see a lot at the heart of the transgender issue is just, especially because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the people who are the transgender people who are in the spotlight are men who transition to women. Correct. And you see it, and they're getting Woman of the Year. They're getting all these different awards, and it's men who want this highlight, and so they transition into women, and it's creating this whole fiasco of. And then how do you, as a feminist, also agree with this?
Right. And I mean, this really is, when you look at the secular left, it is eating their own. Because feminism generally falls in the political spectrum on the left side, right? And there should be a lot of infighting in that this is very contradictory, right? It goes against, women's causes and advancement of women, because you're actually letting men in and supplanting women in the spotlight off of women and the gains that, women have made in society and things like that. They should be very angry about that. In some cases they are, but it's, who takes precedent here? It's, in terms of privileged and people groups and identity groups and all this and that, the whole identity politics realm, their calculus that they sort of work out to say, actually, no, in this case, this person is less privileged or more discriminated against or whatever. I don't profess to know the calculus because I don't think it's based on reason. But
why? Here's a question for you. Why do you think this all, why is it becoming such a major issue in talking about? I feel like that the area I remember this all starting is probably around. I'm thinking all the way back to Caitlyn Jenner is when I can pinpoint a starting point, if I wanted to say, where it started becoming highlight. Yeah, and the media is.
Yeah, and I'd have to go back and look at the exact time frame on it, but I would even wind the clock back if the whole Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner thing didn't happen before this. My indication, or my memory serves, it was around the Supreme Court decision on Obergefell versus Hodges, which was the decision that more or less found the right towards homosexual so-called marriage in the Constitution, right? And so then no longer was it up to the states. It was just on a federal level, this had to be granted. It wasn't but a day that the attention went from the gay marriage debate to transgenderism. I mean, it was immediate. I remember seeing that, and I forget if it was a news article or some social media post, but the drumbeat started immediately following that. Because this is actually how the left works in a lot of ways. When they obtain a victory, it's actually, they're very good at this. When they score a political victory, they waste no time whatsoever moving on to the next front of, their march towards what they're trying to achieve, which is really cultural Marxism. I mean, if you get down to that's, I think, what they're going for is complete cultural and social Marxism. And, so they're very good at just moving on to the next thing. They actually forget entirely all the rhetoric and all the chatter and all of that of the previous thing. They might lump it all together. And with the, LGBTQ things, they kind of get lumped all together. But they move on really quick. And that's what the memory. So what was that? 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. And again, I'm just operating strictly off of memory, but it's kind of right around there. So for about the past 10 years, this has been escalating up in intensity.
Yeah, it's really a slippery slope. And what's funny is you bring that up, and it's the ruling on gay marriage, and it's like even the right now I feel like a lot is pro gay marriage. Yeah. And so it's really become this slippery slope that has really pushed it itself into the whole culture. Yeah,
there's an adage, law is the great teacher, right? Mm-hmm. Because in the popular mind, so the common mind, what is legal is licit. Now, in the Catholic Church and the Catholic moral teaching, we know that there's different levels of law, right? So the lowest level of law being civil law, or like human law, right? Above that is natural law, and above that is divine law, and above that is eternal law. And there's distinctions to be made each one of those, but each one is consistent as it comes down from eternal law down to human law. If it's to be morally licit, it's in line. So a human law cannot violate, say, natural law, or cannot violate one of God's commandments in divine law, right? It has to be consistent all the way through to be morally licit. And so what we get in a civil sense is something becomes legal. You see this with abortion, right? Abortion, after Roe v. Wade, was actually not all that common. But if you look at the statistics, as you go from, was it 1970, was it 6 or 9? 73.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that first 10 years, it really wasn't like rampant. And then when you get into the 80s, it spikes up. And all of a sudden it becomes this mainstream thing. And then it's entered the mind and the heart of people. And, well, it's legal, so it must be okay. That's what they think. Well, it's not illegal, so I'm not doing anything wrong. Right? Well, that's just on one basis of law. So I think, in that sense, when we're talking about these laws and things like that, something like gay marriage and things, and people, once the battle ends on the legal front, the secular proponents, they know they've scored a major victory, because now it's a matter of time before people's convictions just sort of drift according to what the law says. So I think there's a tactical thing that they utilize there. So law being the great teacher. Now, if you understand law and you understand the moral sense of things, and this is why the Catholic Church never gave up on the topic of abortion. Yeah. They're never going to give up on the topic of gay marriage as far as what marriage is. It cannot happen. It's an ontological impossibility. Yeah.
You as you said earlier, as you were referencing gay marriage, or so-called gay marriage.
Yeah, so-called. Yeah. It's like that's it. It's not real. And I think that's the thing. If I were to hit on one thing with the transgenderism, and it involves with homosexuality too, although on a different level, right? Because that has to do with acts. This has to do with personhood. It's a claim about reality, what is real and what is unreal, right? So is your claim about the human person real or is it unreal? Is it true or is it untrue? You could maybe couch it in those terms, but I do like real and unreal because it has to do with the very basis of what reality is. The one thing I want to really underscore before we really dive into maybe some of the ethics and some of the other nuanced details of this is to just underscore and really stress the dignity of the human person.
Yeah.
That regardless of what somebody espouses in their views or even what they have chosen to do to their bodies, it does not diminish their inherent human dignity. It may mar their body so that that's not apparent, if they're like mutilating themselves and things like that. It might make it harder to see, but inherently they have human dignity still. And that's something I just really want to underscore that, when Jesus came and tried to minister in all the different ways that he did, he really did try to seek out and find the lost and the broken where he could. He paid special attention to that. And sometimes it's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes as human beings, we reach a point where as much as I continue to plunge after something, it's not in my particular power, but what is impossible for man is possible for God. So, just in terms of the dignity of the person, that doesn't ever go away. And we need to respect that. And so the conversation that we're having even today isn't diminishing of the human dignity. What we're really going to try to do is circle around the truth of reality. Like what is real? And then work from that point. Because I think that's the key point when talking about transgenderism, what we have to do.
Yeah, I think it is important for sure to just remember the human dignity. I think with politics and the way we push things on top of people can say things to each other, but we have to remember that these are people we're actually talking about.
Exactly.
They have human dignity, and we're supposed to be loving and generous with them.
And we shouldn't aggravate them, right? We should not purposefully go after them and aggravate them or ridicule them or diminish them in some way. Right?
Yeah.
Like we shouldn't, as much as the whole Bud Light thing, Dylan Mulvaney thing is, laughable from the standpoint of Bud Light.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was a miss on their part. They didn't understand their client base. I mean, it's a huge gaffe, a multi-billion-dollar gaffe on their part. But that doesn't diminish the human dignity. So like, of Dylan Mulvaney, right? That's a person. That's a beloved child of God, right? But it's so wrapped up in so many things that it can be very insulting for people. So I don't know. I just think it's a difficult thing we have to try to navigate with this while we maintain human dignity, yet we pursue the truth and love in all things. We're going to be dealing with some really tough situations as Catholics going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be unprecedented in our life. And we have to be prepared for that. So we'll get into a lot of that. I know we have a ton to talk about. And maybe this ends up being 2 episodes. I don't know. But there's a lot to say here.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people, it's weird because I've never experienced like hateful Catholics saying hateful things about, transgenderism, people who support abortion. I've never experienced any Catholic just going at somebody to do it. It's always... how I've experienced, or the people I've been with who've been in these debates, it's always been from a loving standpoint, and it's kind of a good argument, and there's points made from both sides, and I think that's how we have to go about it. But I think oftentimes people point at us and say that we're hateful for this, and why do you think that people can look at us trying to profess the truth and profess this human dignity and see it from a hateful standpoint?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question to ask. I think it has its roots, as far as my analysis goes anyway. If you go back to the philosophical currents in Western civilization, going back to an error in philosophy called nominalism. And nominalism, and philosophy is not my exact expertise, but it more or less says that things themselves don't have objective essences, right? Like the essence of a thing isn't something that simply is on its own. What we name it can help shift or in some ways define what it is, if that makes sense. So nomen, name, it's what we name something is where its essence is derived from, right? And I'm probably like butchering this and oversimplifying it. I'm sure there's philosophers out there who'd be like, oh man, you gotta like do more and say this but essentially that's kind of what it is. And if you take it on its basic level, that if we can name something and it changes what it is, think of the implications of that as it ripples through, because that what we're talking about was like in the 1300s when that was sort of starting to stir and get stoked up as a philosophy. Okay, well, that was based in a solidly Christian culture. Christendom was at its height. The what we know as the modern universities were just being founded. It was, just in the aftermath of St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure, and I mean these great doctors, scholastic doctors of the church. Some of the greatest works of Western civilization were put out right in that time. So it assumed a certain foundation. And they're probably trying to, tweak things and come to a greater understanding. But once you've made that break from, the objective distinction of what things are, over time you see the philosophical drift, right? And we saw in the 17 and 1800s, 16, 17, 1800s with Descartes and Kant and philosophers like that, this turn towards the subject. Right? So no longer is reality based more out there, like in the objective, like what God created and who he is, but it's like this turn towards interiorly to the subjective person, who I am. So, Descartes' famous formulation, I think, therefore I am, right? My amness, my being is found in my mind, and the fact that I am thinking right now. And so you see this shift, this sort of broad shift kind of going over the course of centuries. And as we get to our current age, what's been happening to Christendom and sort of the heritage of Christendom, as our cultures turned from this Judeo-Christian worldview, the so-called Enlightenment around the same time happened, where they no longer had these principles of God as being alive and active. In some ways, they reject the incarnation because they no longer see God as still dwelling with us, in the Eucharist and in the church and even in each one of us, the indwelling of us. They've kind of shifted and said, well, God's distant. He's a watchmaker in the sky, this deism. And when we do that and God becomes distant, all of a sudden these secular forces start taking root. You see it in the French Revolution and sort of the fallout from the French Revolution. And then it gets into our country, and even sort of some of the founding fathers of this country, they were deists. They weren't, firm believers, if you will. Most of them weren't Catholic. It was very a Protestant country, founded a Protestant country. So you see this, and this drift just kind of continues to happen. And then, you get secularism really firmly established in the 20th century. The 19th century, the 1800s, you were seeing it in some measure. So I think as a backdrop there, you have to understand that main point, this subject-object distinction, and that what we name something, can it or can it not change the essence of a thing. The proper understanding is no, the name of something is derived from what it is. As think back to Genesis and Adam and Eve in the garden and things like that. God had Adam name things, not because Adam was creating what those things were. He wasn't making a lion. He's like, that's a lion, and poof, a lion popped out. He saw what it was, and what it was a lion or a tree, or I don't actually know. It doesn't really get that specific, but in my imagination, I see Adam kind of going around naming stuff. But he had to know what it is. God had already made it. Like, it had its natural law, its nature to it. And so this naming thing is really, really important. And now let's get to our topic here then. How does that apply? Well, it's very apparent, right? Think of the pronoun thing. Somebody coming in, they're a biological male, right? It's in every way, biology dictates that, yes, you have a masculine body. This is a thing. It is known. But that person might come out and say, no, I don't want you to call me he, him, his. It's she, hers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're changing language around this claim that I am something different than I am.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like the claim is actually ontological. It's in their very being that I am not this. Because I identify this way, I'm identifying with something, and that is what reality then becomes. And you, all of you around, must now affirm that reality.
Yeah.
And that's the real danger, right? Because now we're not based in truth anymore. How can we possibly square this circle if reality can't be understood in its objective sense? How on earth are we ever going to have regulated interactions, relational interactions with people? I mean, why can't I say that I self-identify as a giraffe? It shouldn't be an absurd question. If we've made the change here about gender, why can't we do it about species?
Yeah.
There's really no mark that would dictate that. That claim should be just as valid as a man saying, I'm a woman. Entirely valid to say, no, I'm a giraffe and you need to treat me as a giraffe. I need a ceiling. Now every building needs to accommodate me in the sense that I need at least a 20-foot ceiling. Because, giraffes, they're tall, right? So, I in order to be accommodated in such a way, I need this. And so every building now needs to be torn down and reconstructed with minimum 20-foot ceilings. It's absurd, right?
Yeah,
it's completely absurd. But this is actually what the claim is, right? If you get down to its philosophical notions about being and what something is.
Yeah, it's weird because the argument I feel like that's used against that is just let them be them, let them be who they are. But argument,
how can you do that in society?
Yeah, that argument alone is you're not letting them be who they are. You're born a man.
Yeah.
Why is it that you're arguing what's going on in their head or what they feel, while as when you see in reality, like you obviously see this is a man, and why do they you're the one affirming the reality, but they want you to affirm a different
unreality.
Yeah,
it's they want you to affirm an unreality. It's not even because a different reality is impossible. There's one universe, there's one reality, there is one is. It's and this is this is where you get into the Aquinas's 5 proofs for God existence. About he that exists in uncontingent basically existence, of which all other things exist from. And we call that God. There's no prior or contingent existence in God. He is. I am who am. Mm-hmm. So I think. It's really about what is real and what is unreal. But in a social context, because we actually now on a practical level, we have to have human interactions with people. And more, it's getting a protected and sanctioned view in a lot of places that you have to affirm that reality. And of course it's causing unrest. Because if you're dedicated and convicted of the truth, like I'm devoted to the truth, then I can't lie. It violates the commandments of God, who is truth itself. Jesus, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If I even tell this little lie, I'm still lying. But how do you regulate that then when someone takes offense at the truth? Well, that's not going to make for a peaceful society, is it? What it's going to create is witness, martyrdom. And that's why I say we're in for some tough times ahead of us because, let's be honest, in some ways, in a lot of ways, the cultural, momentum is on the secular side that is claiming that transgenderism is a real possibility as an ontological reality. That's going to put us on the wrong side of things in a social government sense. Now, the thing with Bud Light and Target, there's some indication that maybe the momentum's not as widespread or as far gone as we might think it is, right? Yeah. That wait a second, if this much momentum can be behind this one thing, that indicates that people are like, nope, and they're standing up for it. Now, it's in a certain context, a commercial context. Would people lose their jobs over it, that conviction? It's a different question. If you were to come up and have to basically sign off saying, Bill is now Nancy, and if you call Nancy Bill or he or his, you're fired, and you have to actually sign this saying that if we have any evidence that you do, you're fired, what are you going to do then? I mean, it's easy to not buy Bud Light, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been easy for me not to buy Bud Light, but that's an aside. But
do you think it's our Christian duty, or we have a duty to, not conform to those pronouns that they're insisting upon?
I do. And again, this might be debated. This is not like doctrine or dogma, but I have a firm conviction that we, as our devotion and fidelity to the truth, language matters. Mm-hmm. And by abusing language in this way, we're actually giving into the deception and the lie. And maybe a distinction here is the way I see it, a deception is when you're unknowingly forced or caused into acquiescing or behaving to something that is not true. Whereas a lie is I'm willfully going about it. Mm-hmm. We're like, I could be deceived. Let's say I just walk up to somebody who's in a dress, kind of slender of figure, long hair, feminine features, and in all sense I look and say, I'm looking at a woman, so I talk to that person and, oh, hi, your name's Sally, she, hers, oh, okay, whatever. But then it comes out at the end that it's actually Frank. Yeah. I was deceived there. But if I know ahead of time, why is Frank dressed like a girl? That's a different situation. If I give in and say, oh, hey, Sally, how you doing? Things like that. And it's maybe even more nuanced than that because, legally speaking, on a civil legal level, there is a means to change someone's legal particular name, proper name, right? Pronouns, I think, are more pernicious, though, because that's common language. And language actually regulates how we relate, how we communicate and commune with other people. And so that is actually, when you get into the language issue, that's digging right into the core of how we even interact as human beings. And that I think, a Christian ought not to give in to the demand for pronouns, despite what other people think, because it gives into this notion that we can change reality.
Sure.
And that's not the Christian foundation. Mm-hmm. Like the Christian claims are very clear in this, what is and what is not.
Yeah. What would you say, I guess, in terms of, I think you talked about it a little bit, but where it is a case of your job? Like right now, say someone's working somewhere. I think I had a friend who actually came across this issue and she didn't know what to do, or something happened where she knew that this person, I think, was a biological man who transitioned to a woman, but she still used his correct pronouns. And so what would you say? And I think like the company was like, hey, don't do that. Like you use what they're asking for. And so what would you say in that case? It's your job's on the line.
Yeah, incredibly difficult on this. And
because you have to support your family. So
you do. And so I think you do have to weigh goods there. There's a certain element, and there's maybe a tactic of avoidance there, and making active steps to put yourself out of that circumstance where you yourself are going to be put in that situation. And that goes for a lot of company policies, right? I mean, we could probably, it's another topic altogether, but what are the boundaries of cooperation with evil? That's its own ethical principle there. I think you should take active steps to try to get yourself out of that circumstance, while not, obviously if your family's on the line and things like that, like food, shelter, and clothing of your kids is a greater good, but really try to be as limber and duck and dodge out of that. If it's forced upon you, that's your chance to witness in a way. I do think there needs to be on a political, civil level, a lot of legal protections for religious freedom accommodations on things like this. Do I think that's going to happen? I don't. I'm not very optimistic just in terms of the political discourse on this at this moment anyway, but But it might even mean, okay, well, what industries can I work in and can't I work in? And this is going to be some serious discernment for serious faithful Catholics down the line. And it may select you out. I mean, when I talk to some of our students going into healthcare fields and things like that, I really do caution them a little bit about beware of which organizations you may take a job with. And not just on this thing, but I mean, in terms of life issues and abortion, and don't put yourself in a position where it's going to be hard to not violate your conscience. Mm-hmm. And they know, they have a well-formed conscience, so they know what the truth is. So I think it's a difficult question. I think active steps should be taken where it's feasible to try to get out of that. But I also get it. I have to make a livelihood here. And so there's a certain amount of like, yeah, keep your head down, but also be looking, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like, don't aggravate the situation. Know where your real battle is, who the real enemy is. It's probably not against your employer. There's something greater going on here. And yeah, my heart goes out to people in those really tough situations where it is in their face. And, you know, maybe it's even taking a different position in the company so that you can find a circumstance where that's not being aggravated, and you can just do the work, the good work that you're there to do. You know? And not have this all be about trying to get you to acquiesce and affirm something which clearly violates your understanding of reality itself.
Yeah. Doesn't that say something about where our country, our culture is at right now? Mm-hmm. Where, you know, you're forced to basically go against your religious beliefs and our Christian beliefs that of the human person. Yeah. And really, it should be just common knowledge and common sense everywhere. Like, this is, first of all, a violation against, in America, the First Amendment. Yeah. And at the very least, just a violation of just your beliefs in general. Yeah. No, I agree. It's a challenging time, but, you know, is this a surprise in a secular culture that doesn't value life at any level? Mm-hmm. It's the material reduction and the commodification of human life has been going on in a political and economic sense, you know, pretty much unabated. They've turned a blind eye to a lot of these things, and it should be no surprise that they don't care about people's religious practice. But again, who is the real enemy here? It's not the government, it's not the employer, it's not the activists out there. That's not the real enemy. Satan is the real enemy. Mm-hmm. The father of lies is the real enemy. And so our war is actually ultimately not against flesh and blood, right? It's against principalities and powers. And we know Jesus has the ultimate victory there, right? But that is an act of faith to believe that. And that's where I take actually a lot of encouragement in our current historical moment from the early church and the Roman martyrs. Because they were such that they would rather be fed to lions than so much as burn a half an incense to Caesar. You know, half a pinch of incense to Caesar. And they willfully went to their death. Horrific, torturous, awful death. And sometimes had to watch their entire families and loved ones and community first get executed horrifically, knowing that their fate was sealed as well. And they still chose fidelity to the truth. I mean, think about that. No one's going to see it. It's just a half a pinch of incense. That's all you got to do. Mm-hmm. And then you get to go on and live your life. And they wouldn't do it because they knew God sees it. They actually know, what is this life? You know, it's nothing to me compared to what's waiting for me. So I think when we think about, you know, what our witness to be, take a lot of consolation in the martyrs, especially the early church martyrs, who it's a different culture than they were living in. But in a lot of ways, there's parallels to it where I think our witness can be there. And just knowing that the Holy Spirit is there. And I'm not saying this is easy to just like say, oh, yeah, the Holy Spirit's going to be there. So, you know, don't worry about what's going to happen to you in your job. No, that's terrifying to think about what might happen to you if you stand up and witness against this in a public way. It's terrible. I mean, but we as Christians have to do it. Remember what actually happened to Rome. It was converted. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And so I think we do have to look back in church history and take, in some ways, our template or our blueprint from them. That part of it probably hasn't changed in the church.
So where does your martyrdom lie? Because I think it's going to be out there, and confidently know that Christ is with you in it.
Yeah. To someone who, I don't know, might have a friend or someone who's maybe they themselves is listening to this and they're going through some sort of gender dysphoria or something similar. And what can a Christian do to affirm someone in their? Because I think ultimately this comes down to the family.
Yeah,
is where the issue starts. Is in the family. I mean, I'm not saying like maybe good Christian families. Maybe I just never experienced this, but I mean, I think personally, I think it does come down to the family and how someone's raised. But I'm thinking of somebody maybe who's come to college and they're hanging around some of their Christian friends and they're talking about this. How can you as a Christian affirm someone in their gender identity?
Yeah. Boy, it's a big question. Yeah. Well, I think, going back to, again, that reality thing, you do have to love them in the truth.
Yep.
It is not a loving thing to betray the truth, right? So your first order, in a lot of ways is to continue to keep them rooted in reality. But then by way of accompaniment, right? Insofar as they let you in, right? Insofar as the relationship is there for you to be a real person, a real relationship in their life. Help them try to get to what is the root cause of this. And it's all very, very challenging and confusing because the spike in incidence rate in this correlates very much with the propaganda on all levels of it, especially when there's people that are already lonely and alienated in their lives due to things like technology and social media and some of these general things in the sort of the cultural milieu right now that have dehumanized people. And so they are wanting and lacking for something. And so when they're more or less promised to be in the limelight and get praise and adulation, if all they say is that they identify as another gender, right? And all of a sudden they're put to the front of the line, put on the pedestal.
Courageous.
Yeah, courageous, lauded as a hero, this kind of a thing. There's a lot of people that have, felt very as much as outcasts, very lonely, again, alienated, that look at that, and the temptation is very real to say maybe at the core of all of this is that I'm just not being recognized for how I feel interiorly. And so if people would just do that, everything would change. So, trying to accompany them through that real discernment processes to why is it that you feel that you're somebody in the wrong body, right? And trying to connect them with real resources that will really help them. And unfortunately, this is, the ideology of transgenderism has entirely infiltrated medicine, to the point where, the American Academy of Pediatrics and all these like physician credentialing agencies and all of this stuff are more or less coming out on the side of transgenderism entirely against the actual science of the thing.
Yeah.
Right? There's no basis that these mutilatory surgeries or hormone treatments or anything like that are beneficial. There's no long-term evidence of this. In fact, it's the contrary, where studies are allowed to be done anyway. The ideology is dictating medicine now, and that's a dangerous thing as well.
Yeah.
So, it's a tough one when you get to the personal level, whereas I'm meeting somebody and they're making this claim. How do I love them best? There's an element of discernment there. I can't tell you in the abstract.
Yeah.
It's going to have to sort of accompany them through, keep them rooted in the truth. They may deny all of that. But again, our obligation as Christians is not to follow them at all costs, even to the detriment of denying the truth. That's actually not our obligation. I mean, think of the commandment when Jesus sent them out into the towns, the 12 and then the 72 and all of that. And he says, whatever house you enter and they welcome you, stay there. Wherever they do not receive you, shake the dust off your feet and move on. I mean, Jesus himself, in the bread of life discourse, did not give up on his claim that, we must eat his flesh and drink his blood in the Eucharist. Everybody left, and he turned to the apostles and says, are you too going to leave me? So I think knowing that the basis for being rooted in the truth is there.
Yeah.
And when you read St. Paul, he's adamant that we must stay in the truth all the way up and down all of his letters, that we cannot forsake the truth. We have to call people to correction, even to the point where he says we have to kick these people out of the community. They have no place here because they're polluting everything. And I'm not saying transgender people pollute wherever they go. That's not what I'm saying. But just at the basis that there's some times where you have to just simply say, I can do no more. Mm-hmm. I've actually tried. You're not actually accepting the legitimate help based in the truth that I'm giving. And I can do nothing more for you.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens.
And I think, maybe this isn't great to bring up in your argument. You might be put as a conspiracy theorist, but you look at it and it's the same thing with like abortion and these industries. They're making millions of billions of dollars off of all the transitions that are happening in the world. They get kids on it, and it's like then their population just doubles.
It's a thing for the wealthy too.
Yeah.
If you look at it, and a lot of it. Most insurance plans aren't going to cover, the transitioning procedures and things like surgeries and hormone treatments, because it's not actual medicine, and we'll get to that in a little bit too. Like, it's not actual medicine. And so they're not going to pay for it. So it's a lot of this, becomes out of pocket expenses. So, you're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a person. And even if you go into these full, transition surgeries and things like that, there's maintenance surgeries that are required. Because if you are, a biological male and you have your genitalia removed and skin reshaped to try to form the shape and the features of female genitalia, you know what's going to happen over time? Because that's a surgical wound. Your body's going to try to heal. Well, when you get a cut, what does it try to do? It tries to close, right? So what is this giant incision and your lower region's going to try? It's going to try to heal and close up because it's an area of infection, right? So like maintenance surgeries are needed, down the line. So all of this is terribly expensive.
Yeah. So my idea or my thought process around the whole thing is they spend, all these millions of dollars on advertising saying how much they care about you, how much they love. They don't. They're not thinking of the human dignity and the human person. They're thinking of the paycheck they're going to get.
So what's at the heart of that then, right? Because again, we go back to the claim of gender dysphoria, and maybe even a distinction there when we talk about language, and a book every person needs to read independent of this topic, just because it's so useful and so helpful for our cultural moment, is Joseph Pieper's Abuse of Language, Abuse of Power. Every single person, it's not long, it's like 50 or 80 pages long. It's just like a little booklet, and it's powerfully impactful. The title kind of says it all. An abuse of language is an abuse of power. And that's what these people are doing in terms of the activism, is they're abusing language and abusing power. They're making buku bucks off of this. All right. So what's the first abuse of language? There's a lot of them. I don't even know if this is first in order. It's the first I'm going to say, but dysphoria versus disorder. So the language used right now is in the DSM, the manual, the psychological manual. The current version of it is to call this gender dysphoria. So like I feel like I'm the other gender, right? It's on the level of sort of feelings or carrying this with, like I'm carrying this discordant reality within me, right? I feel a different way. Think of the converse as a euphoric feeling, right? When I'm experiencing euphoria, what am I experiencing? This feeling of great high, like it's like a high, it's like this exuberance. It's this, wow, life, so much life here. It's euphoric. So dysphoria is like I'm a feeling another way. The last version of the DSM had this as gender identity disorder. So disorder versus dysphoria. Okay. Right? Disorder means it's against the order, right? It's opposed to the order. Well, what does that bespeak to? Well, that bespeaks that there is an objective reality to things, right? If it's ordered, that I can point to the structure of this order and know it and abide by it, right? We see this in, the order of mathematics, the order of physics, the order of chemistry. All of this is presumed to be based upon a knowable, predictable, unchangeable structure. It's ordered. So even that language, dysphoria versus disorder, is a pernicious change. Like they've shifted something in the language to soften it. See, it's only about feelings. How you feel is what's important, not what is, not the objective reality. So getting back to that, I can't underscore that enough. It's about what's real and what is unreal. So that's like language abuse number one, right? So when you get into that and you want to think about medicine, how do we treat something like this? How do we, well, if the diagnosis in medicine is that this is just a mere perception thing, you would maybe back up. What we would always want to do is treat that which is sick. So what is sick in the person's body? Like in the transgendered person's body, what is sick? I don't know. What do you think, Matt? What's sick?
Probably the mind, right?
It has to be the mind, right?
Because
again, even we're finding the diagnosis in the psychological manual, right?
Yeah.
It's of the mind, right? Think about, okay, so we picked on men a lot. Let's shift over and pick on women.
All right.
All right, so what's wrong in the woman's body if she has gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder? What's wrong in her body, in her genitalia?
Yeah.
Nothing. It's entirely, beside the fact. Everything is actually functioning according to the order of biology, entirely perfect and well. And if it's not functioning well, actually, there's other diagnoses for that, right? Yeah. You're going to diagnose a pathology in those organs, right? It's not like their uterus or ovaries or breast tissue are sick. It's not like we say if someone has breast cancer that, well, they must not be a woman, right? No. Yeah. The order of the thing is that the breast tissue is sick. It's called breast cancer in this case. And there's interventions that we can do. And we're not going to treat, the fingers or the heart, or we're going to treat the cancerous tissue, the cancerous organ. That's what we'll treat. So maybe they'll do surgery and, chemotherapy and radiation. So go back to this as a medical issue. What is sick in the body, the mind? So
yeah, it's like if someone comes up to you and says, I believe I should have been born without a hand,
right,
or without a finger. You're not going to say, all right, let's cut that off. And
although there are radical instances where people will do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's and I'm blanking on the term, but it's there's and they try to draw the parallel to that somehow that made that person better.
Yeah.
No, it's you're not treating what is sick though. Mm-hmm. Again, if you want them to do be well, you have to treat that which is sick. And there's reasons for this, right? Just on a moral, ethical level. One, just for the good of the person, there's principles in medical ethics, two of them that come into play here called the principles of totality and integrity, right? And really the parts of the body are for the good of the whole body. So that's kind of the totality of the thing, right? And then the integrity of the thing is that, it's functioning as it ought to, and that we want to maintain wholeness, the integrated functionality of the body, integrated integrity, you see the root words there. And so we actually want to keep the entire body as intact and whole as possible. Again, it goes back to nature. It goes back to how the body is designed and made to work, and it's for the best good of the person. And so we want to keep the body whole and intact, the integral function always going. But in some instances we can't. So go back to that, the cancerous breast tissue, or even maybe more exactly a cancerous uterus might be a better, clearer example, where if there's cancer there, we might remove that breast tissue or the uterus, wherever the cancer lies, in order to maintain the whole health of the body. Because if that cancer stays, it's going to spread, metastasize, and then the whole body dies. It literally disintegrates, right? The integrated functioning of the body kind of unravels and apart, and then bodily death occurs. So we want to keep the wholeness of it, but sometimes you are willing, and it's morally licit, to sacrifice a part of the body in order to maintain the overall health and function of the body. Cancer is like the clear cut and dry one, because obviously you want to try to get the cancer out. And there's other principles, double effect and things like that come into play that you'd need to satisfy. But assuming all these things are satisfied, you would remove the cancerous organ or the cancer, even at the cost of the functioning of the body. So lo and behold, the cancerous uterus is removed. The woman is no longer able to have children.
Yeah.
And that's a loss. But it's not the loss they were actually intending to choose. They actually wanted to get rid of the cancer. That was their main goal.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the transgender thing. What is it that we're treating, right? If we remove breast tissue, if we remove genitalia, what is it that we're treating? There's nothing sick there.
Yeah.
And all we're actually causing is now a dysfunctioning in the body, right? So if you're a male and you have your genitalia removed, all of a sudden, you have to do something in order, not to get too much into the graphic biology of it, but you still have to go to the restroom, right? Okay, you're going to be more prone to infections and things like that, because now the entire body has been reshaped as this functional organ has been removed that normally, I got to go use the restroom, you go use the restroom and things like that. And so there's consequences. You've actually removed function from the body unnecessarily. It never needed to, because again, it never really got to the root of what's going on in the mind, because none of those things are the mind. And so I think as we kind of discern, how do you help the mind in this instance? And that's what's not even being allowed to be talked about, and then there's the hormone treatment, which is a whole other thing, because that can actually have whole body effects, because hormones regulate the functioning and the integration of your whole body. So there can be dire consequences, especially for children, if they're being given, it's not even treatment. I don't even want to call it treatment or therapy. That's an abusive language too. It's chemical mutilation in that part.
Yeah, chemical castration.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if
because what they're giving I can't remember the name of the drug. Maybe you know it. What they're giving them is the same thing they would give like a pedophile for.
Yeah.
So they give them that same thing, right?
Yeah. So I think I'm not entirely well versed in the exact details of it, so I'm a little hesitant to speak on the specific drug names, but I've heard something similar to that. But yeah, it's one of the ideas is if you give it, puberty blockers, so to speak, in a prepubescent state, that you actually stunt the sexual development of that particular individual, male or female, depending on which hormone you're injecting and which derivative of it you're injecting in their body. And that's going to cause irreparable harm to them. It's not recoverable. You can't wind the biological clock back. It is a one-way street developmentally like that. And so you're causing permanent, lifelong damage to them.
So I've heard that you can, I think their argument is you can put them on this treatment and it basically just pauses it and you can resume it.
Not true, because it's not biologically, developmentally, it's not like that. There's sort of a cascade of developmental stages and cues and things like that need to happen. When you disrupt something so massively large in development, especially if it's done over many, many years, you will never be able to just hit play and all of a sudden as a 19-year-old, after having been on these hormones for the last 10 years, you're not just going to all of a sudden go through puberty.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. It's just any sense of it is not based in science. There's no scientific study that has studied that, in according to the methodology of science. And if there is, please bring it to me. I'd love to read the article where they've done such a comprehensive study and have shown that claim is scientifically valid and robustly valid. Because at the level of the ideologies pushing these things through, my goodness, the widespread harm that's being done is downright evil.
Oh yeah, especially anything that I think involves especially children.
Yeah,
and this development of because they're children. They don't know.
They're entirely innocent. They will believe the environment that they're around. Children are they're like sponges. They're very moldable.
Yeah,
and they'll go along with it. But this is why Jesus says, woe to you who leads one of these little ones astray. It's better than the millstone have been hung around your neck and you're thrown into the sea. I mean, those are some pretty aggressive words.
Yeah, and nowadays, people are just throwing it down on their children, just like decide. That there's this one story I know. A priest was telling me about it, that he knew a professor. Maybe he heard it's a story that he heard, but there was this professor that he raised, I think, his 2 kids, and he said, I didn't use like the gender, any sort of gender term around them. He didn't call them male, he didn't call them boy, he didn't call them girl, and his 2 kids both identified just with their natural gender. They because he asked them, he's like, so what do you think you are? Because they asked what they were, and he was like, well, I feel like I'm a boy. I was a little boy. And he was disappointed. He said, I've cried so much. Wow. And it's like,
so
you
twisted.
Want it to be twisted like that. You want it to be against Nate. And it's like, what is the gain from this? It's like, you just want
pride, vanity. I mean, if you look at just fallen human nature, there's nothing new under the sun here, right? There's nothing new in terms of just these human impulses we have towards the vices. And so, pride and vanity and wanting to create your own reality, that I am my own God.
Yeah.
That's what's at the heart of all of it. And that's why this is demonic and satanic.
Yeah.
Is because at the heart of all of these undercurrents, right, is this notion that I can be my own God. Yeah. And that is, not only is that not true, that's diabolically untrue.
Yeah.
And and of course that's going to cause a stir out in the culture, right? If someone that's out in the secular culture that espouses a lot of this ideology listens to this and hears that, they're going to take great offense at what I'm saying right now. That's just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes down to what is real and what is unreal. What is reality? What is not reality? What is true? What is false? And our claim is that there is such a thing as objective truth. It can be knowable. We don't determine it. I have to be obedient to it. And that's diametrically opposed to every undercurrent going on in the ideologies and secular culture right now. It's entirely opposed to it. And that's why I say there's something different here than maybe other, political and cultural issues. Because in some ways the masks have all been like taken off on this one. Either you have to go all in to the claim that you can fashion reality however you want, or you have to actually say, you know what, I have to actually stand up for the truth here. And my fidelity to the truth is more important than any relationship and even my own life. It's certainly more important than my own comfort. And as I'm saying these words, like, it's in the back of my mind that, okay, am I going to, as an act of faith, be able to walk that to the end consequence, whatever that may be, in a hostile culture that I'm living in, you know? And we're, in our micro environment, our circumstance, Matt, we're just, we're at a Newman Center. It's we're around, we're friends all the time, friendly views, this kind of a thing. But the culture is encroaching around, and even politically, the state of North Dakota is, still a favorable environment for us and things. But you go across the river, just a few miles to the east into the state of Minnesota, and it's a different political environment. Whether or not the people themselves in any given community or group espouse those views, there will be real cascading consequences down the line, and as this thing continues to get ratcheted up. Yeah. So am I willing to go that far? By the grace of God, I will. Yeah. That I'll take it wherever the Lord leads me, with complete and utter confidence in Him. Amen. But boy, these are not easy times to live in. No. So.
But I mean, neither was getting thrown in and eaten by lions. Right?
No, right? What's easy about that? When we always imagine, well, in the heroic sense, of course I would go to my death like that for the faith, right? But you can't make your own bed in the morning, kind of a thing. I'm thinking, did I make my bed this morning? But you know what I mean? Those who are faithful in small matters will be faithful in large matters. And I think, we do have to be faithful in even the small, uncomfortable, trying moments and encounters as we run up against this ideology more and more. Because it's going to come, and it's going to hit people's real relationships, real friendships, family members, loved ones. It's going to happen where people are going to be faced with, what do I do within my own family?
Yeah.
And it's probably not going to spit out or fall out equally. You're going to find people are going to take very different positions, and it will shock you and surprise you, I think. But I also remember a lot of Jesus' words when he talks about, unless you pick up your cross and follow me, you're not fit for the kingdom. Peter says, just recently in Mass, I was reading the, what about us, Lord? Peter says, we've left, everything. While whoever leaves father, mother, brother, sister for my sake will receive 100-fold in this life and eternal life to come. Mm-hmm. But he also promises that he didn't come to bring peace. No, he came to bring the sword, right? He's going to pit father against son, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, sister against mother-in-law. All these relational, familial distinctions. Where are you going to choose? Because we're not going to choose always on the same side of things, and that's going to be painful, as it causes even more division and sort of tears at the very root of the family. And then I can't help but think of Our Lady's promise, at Fatima, that the last battle that Satan will wage will be within marriage and family.
Which, looking around now, it's like,
is there
are
any
we in
doubt?
the final battle right now? I mean, it's
under that lens.
Yeah.
Can you really make a case that this is not playing out as the final battle?
Yeah.
What the time frame on that is, I have no idea. I mean, I really don't. I'm not one that's trying to predict an exact time and hour, because our Lord says, I don't even know the time or the hour,
Yeah.
But yeah, the marriage and family has never been more attacked. And we're looking at what's happening now, and it goes just to the root and the core of it. So it's an interesting moment to live in, but for such a moment as this, we've been made, and God's called us to it, and He'll give us the grace for it.
Yeah, be courageous and take a stand for what you believe. The belief of the Catholic Church. Like, be courageous, take a stand, have faith in God.
Yeah.
But we are over an hour now.
Yeah,
so
I figured we would. I told Matt beforehand, like, when I get going on this one, I'm just going to roll. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, so we will definitely have to have another episode on, again, soon, just about this topic. But yeah, any final thoughts before we close out here?
Yeah, just continue to remain close to the Lord in this. Hear His clear, small voice to the truth. Know Him, and you will know the truth. And try to love anybody that you encounter the best that you can. And if you fail in loving them, seek His mercy and His grace. I don't do this perfect. Would never profess that I would expect anybody else to somehow love perfectly, especially in these very difficult circumstances. Continue to reflect, continue to discern, seek that path of truth and love, and just have all your confidence in Him. Mary's Immaculate Heart will triumph. Jesus' Sacred Heart has triumphed. Like, we have nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
He's won the victory.
Yeah, especially in this month. Just keep all those struggling in your prayers, and ask for the strength of the Sacred Heart and God's grace. All right, well, subscribe, share. This episode may be on YouTube, so hit the bell button and you can get the notifications.
And it'll be promptly canceled on YouTube.
Yes. We'll see how fast we can get it. First episode on YouTube. All right, well, God bless everyone.